Breaking news Part 2. Jerry Yan and Tong Liya confirm. I fly his entire family to the UK for vacation. Cotswolds countryside, Beckford Estate, and later Edinburgh Castle. The rain came softly, and so did the truth. The morning after Jerry's emotional piano serenade under the ancient oak tree, a soft English rain kissed the estate grounds. Not enough to send guests indoors, but enough to awaken that classic British calm, the kind of rain that makes you wrap yourself in shawls, sip warm tea and reflect. Tong Liya stood by the large bay window in their suite, watching as mist rolled in from the hills. She wore one of Jerry's oversized white shirts, barefoot, hair in gentle waves. In the distance, Jerry's nieces played in the puddles, their laughter echoing across the dewy grass. Jerry came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "The rain suits you," he murmured. "Why?" she asked with a half-smile. "Because it's quiet, unexpected, and makes everything softer." They stood in silence. After a decade of hushed affection and unspoken sacrifices, the storm inside them had finally settled into a peaceful drizzle. Scene 2. A message from a prince. Later that day, a sleek black Aston Martin arrived at the estate. It wasn't paparazzi. It was a hand-delivered message with a wax seal, from Clarence House. The card inside was embossed with royal insignia. To Mr. Jerry Yan and Ms. Tong Liya, it has come to our attention that your union was recently celebrated on English soil in a manner both elegant and profoundly heartfelt. As admirers of love stories that transcend borders and expectations, it would be our honor to welcome you as private guests to Scotland's historical seat, Edinburgh Castle. The Duke of Rothesay. Tong Liya blinked at the card, then at Jerry. "Are we being invited by royalty?" Jerry laughed. "I told you. When you love quietly, the world listens loudly." Scene 3. The Departure and a Promise at Dawn. On the morning of August 3rd, after 2 days of post-vow relaxation and countryside serenity, the family prepared to head north to Edinburgh. But before leaving, Jerry led Tong Liya down a hidden cobblestone path behind the manor. There, under a flowering dogwood tree, stood a bench engraved with the words, "To the one I waited for." "I had this made 6 years ago," he said, motioning for her to sit. "I was going to bring you here after our 5th anniversary. But then life kept getting in the way." Tong Liya ran her fingers across the carving. "You've been planning this all along." "I had to. You were the only thing I was ever sure of." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a second ring, a handcrafted emerald eternity band, with their initials J and L etched inside. "This isn't for show. Not for the public. This is just for us. I've waited 10 years to wear a ring in daylight," she whispered. "And now you'll wear it under the Scottish sky." Scene 4. Arrival at Edinburgh, a castle for two. Their black convoy drove through the heart of Edinburgh, watched curiously by locals and tourists alike. By now, social media was exploding with hashtags like #JerryandLiya_Scotland and #CotswoldVows, but the couple remained unfazed. When the castle gates opened, the family was greeted with subtle but unmistakable grandeur. Bagpipes, castle staff in formal tartan, and a private welcome from the Duke of Rothesay himself. Jerry bowed. Tong Liya curtsied, elegant and composed. "Your love story has traveled far," the Duke remarked. "And we're honored to shelter it within these walls." Their suite overlooked the Royal Mile, with castle turrets casting shadowy silhouettes against the late summer sky. That night, as dusk fell over the Scottish capital, Jerry and Tong Liya stepped out onto their private balcony. Below, a single violinist played a rendition of Canon in D, the same piece Tong Liya once danced to in her youth. It was a surprise gift from Jerry. She turned to him, eyes filled with emotion. "You remembered." "I remember everything." Scene 5. A castle dinner lit by flames and forever. Dinner that evening was set in the castle's rosewood chamber, where hundreds of candles flickered in Gothic chandeliers. The long banquet table was set only for 12, Jerry's family, the couple, and 2 royal liaisons. But the most breathtaking part was what hung behind them, A tapestry embroidered with a scene of two cranes standing together through a storm, a symbol of eternal loyalty in Chinese mythology. Tong Liya was moved to tears. "I had this woven in secret," Jerry confessed. "Year 7. I didn't know when or where we'd ever display it. But somehow I knew it would be here." Throughout dinner, laughter flowed. His cousins recounted childhood tales. His mother told the story of Jerry's first heartbreak. Tong Liya shared how Jerry once flew overnight from Taipei to Urumqi just to leave her a note when she refused to take his calls. It said, "Even if you hate me, let it be while I'm close," she recalled, smiling through misty eyes. Madame Yen lifted her wine glass. "To the kind of love that doesn't need a microphone to echo." Scene 6. Midnight Confessions in the Tower. At midnight, Jerry led Tong Liya to the tallest watchtower of the castle. They climbed the narrow stone staircase until they reached the open turret. The wind whipped around them, and the moon cast a silver glow over the ancient city below. "This is where they used to light beacons during war," Jerry said. "And now it's where I tell you the last secret I've kept." Tong Liya turned, intrigued. He pulled out a folded, yellowed piece of paper. "I wrote this the night before we eloped in 2015. A letter. A letter to the man I was afraid I'd never get to be." He read aloud. "Dear Jerry, if you're reading this, it means you found the courage to love her without hiding. I know you're afraid of press, of scandal, of failure. But remember, she said yes. She already chose you. Now go and choose her. Every day. Even when the world isn't looking. The version of you who already has everything he ever wanted." Tong Liya wrapped her arms around him. The wind howled like ghosts of the past being released. "You've always been brave," she whispered. "No," he said, voice breaking. "You made me brave." Scene 7. What the cameras never caught. The couple spent the next 3 days in Scotland, away from the world. They rode horses through the Highlands. They visited hidden bookstores. They laughed over haggis and shared ice cream beneath drizzling skies. And not a single paparazzi shot leaked, because Jerry had rented out every location in advance to protect their peace. One afternoon, a cafe owner in Inverness told reporters. They sat in the corner, just the two of them, feeding each other strawberries. It wasn't celebrity love. It was real love, the kind that doesn't care who's watching. On their final night, Jerry cooked dinner himself in the castle kitchen, dressed in an apron that read "Liya's Forever Chef." He grilled lamb, made truffle risotto, and poured red wine. 10 years of fancy restaurants," he said, placing her plate down. "But this is the first time I get to cook for my wife in a kitchen with no hiding." Tong Liya raised her glass. "Then let's toast to the next 10, with no shadows." 3 weeks before the world would discover their decade-long secret, Jerry Yen sat alone in his Taipei studio, gazing at an old photo. Tong Liya backstage in 2015, smiling at him while holding a bouquet he'd secretly left in her dressing room. The years had blurred that memory, but the feeling was still sharp. His phone buzzed. It was Tong Liya calling from Beijing. "It's time," she said gently. "Let's stop hiding. Let's bring your family, let's go far away, and let's finally just breathe." Jerry exhaled as if he'd been underwater for 10 years. "Are you sure?" he asked, voice low. "I've been sure since 2015. I just waited for you to catch up." That night, Jerry made 4 calls, to his mother, his sister, his cousin who'd always been suspicious, and finally, his family's old travel agent. "No press. No hotels. Find me somewhere the world doesn't look. Somewhere green. Somewhere I can show them everything." Scene 2. The family gathers in secret. By July 29th, his extended family was discreetly flown in from different parts of Taiwan. They arrived in staggered batches, their luggage tagged only with a discreet Y10 code. Jerry personally greeted them at a private lounge inside Taoyuan Airport. His mother stepped out first, confused but smiling. "Why is this flight so quiet?" she asked, looking around. "Because I want to talk," Jerry said. "And this time I want you to hear everything." In the lounge, he handed out handwritten letters instead of travel itineraries. Each family member received one, ink-stained, raw, honest. Letters that explained everything. The secret marriage, the reasons, the fear, the love, and the pain of pretending. Tears fell before takeoff. But not one voice raised. Not one question of doubt. His mother walked up to him last, letter clutched in hand, and whispered, "I knew. Mothers always know. But I wanted you to come to me when your heart was ready." Then she took Tong Liya's hand and said, "Thank you for waiting for him." Scene 3. Love above the clouds. Aboard the private jet bound for the UK, the family finally saw Jerry as more than a celebrity. He was a husband. A man who had protected his marriage not with words but with loyalty. Tong Liya, seated beside Madame Yen, offered her a box of handmade sesame mooncakes. "I learned to make these from your hometown," she said shyly. Madame Yen took a bite, eyes glistening. "They taste like home." Meanwhile, the children ran up and down the aisles of the luxury cabin, playing pretend pilot, while Jerry moved from seat to seat, telling stories of how he and Liya met on a variety show set, how he courted her quietly for a year, and how they exchanged private vows in a rented temple in Kyoto, without witnesses or photos. "I couldn't give her the world then," he said, "but I gave her my word." Scene 4. First steps on British soil. They touched down at Farnborough Airport outside London just before dawn on July 31st. Mist lingered on the runway as Jerry helped his mother down the jet steps, shielding her from the cool breeze. Waiting at the terminal were luxury vans bearing no logos, only the letter L on their number plates, another quiet symbol Jerry had chosen for Tong Liya. The drive to their countryside estate took nearly 2 hours, but nobody slept. Tong Liya played Chinese folk songs from her phone. Jerry's nieces asked if UK horses wore coats. His cousin insisted the Queen might invite them to tea if they smiled hard enough. It wasn't a vacation, it was a homecoming. Scene 5. Beckford Estate, the hidden paradise. When the family vans pulled into Beckford Estate, jaws dropped. The property was breathtaking. A Georgian manor surrounded by 300-year-old oak trees, rose gardens, swans drifting across a private lake, and stables tucked behind ivy-covered walls. Tong Liya had arrived 3 days early to prepare every detail. Each room was personalized, with framed photos from family albums, scented candles made in Taiwan, and red envelopes on every bed, marked with blessings written in calligraphy. In the main hall, a scroll hung with the words, 10 years quiet. Now we speak. Jerry's mother clutched his hand as they entered the foyer. "You brought us to heaven," she whispered. Scene 6. A lantern ceremony for the past. That night, Jerry and Tong Liya led the family to the edge of the lake. Lanterns sat in rows, each paired with a wish card. "These are for what we couldn't say," Tong Liya explained. "For every moment we stayed silent." As one, the family lit their lanterns, whispered prayers, and released them onto the water. Orange flames floated across the glassy surface, swaying like memories refusing to sink. Jerry wrote one sentence on his wish card before setting it afloat. "I'm not afraid anymore." Tong Liya watched his lantern drift next to hers, which read, "Thank you for choosing me again and again." A light drizzle began to fall, but no one moved. Instead, they stood together, holding hands, letting the raindrops bless their release. Scene 7. A new day, a new life. The next morning, laughter filled the estate. Children raced in the hallways, Jerry's cousins cooked breakfast in the giant kitchen, and Tong Liya taught the younger girls how to braid flower crowns in the garden. Jerry stood by the upstairs railing, looking down at the life he'd built, finally visible in daylight. He turned to his mother, who had just joined him with tea. "Is this okay?" he asked. She looked at him, proud and teary-eyed. "It's more than okay. It's real. And you deserve real." Scene 8. The hidden anniversary gift. On the evening of August 1st, 10 years to the day since their secret marriage, Tong Liya handed Jerry a small box wrapped in gold silk. Inside was a delicate locket made of